let's get into it. And as much as we are going to analyse and look at certain things, in simple terms from the headlines, it was a fair result at the end of the day. You can't really have any complaints, can we?
No, absolutely not. I just think, I think both sides got what they deserved. So I think that a good starting point is to give huge credit to Newcastle for their performance that they put in. I thought they were absolutely brilliant to a man, not just in terms of the quality that they show, but also the work rate, the desire. Just ran all over Liverpool in a way that we are so used to seeing Liverpool do to other sides.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of Klopp-like performance actually from them. Just they were so good in terms of their press and so aggressive that Liverpool couldn't really get going. And as I say, that kind of added up really to them deserving it on that basis. And Liverpool just didn't match it. They didn't do enough to get there and match that level. And by contrast, looked kind of sluggish, sloppy. And if you do that in the Wembley final, and there was just no point at which in the match really that it felt like Liverpool were kind of showing the best or getting some rhythm going or really starting to disrupt Newcastle's rhythm. It was pretty much from minute 1 to minute 90. That was kind of the flow of the game. And so, if that's how the game plays out, then you just cannot argue with the fact that Newcastle ultimately deserved it because they outperformed Liverpool by a rather large margin in the end.
Yeah, and it's unanimous across the board from anyone that you speak to on that. And even from both of us that were there, the eye test, it is just impossible to argue about it. I mean, Robbie Fowler talked about it afterwards, as it's showing there on screen if you join us on YouTube or social media, saying we were lacking energy and fight. In terms of just the battle, was it will, do you think, or could we just not match their physicality?
Yeah, I mean, I did say on the day, and I kind of stand by this to an element that I just think there was a little bit of Newcastle wanting it more. I mean, it clearly meant so much more to them. I mean, you could see it in the stands. I thought that the Newcastle fans, you could tell they wanted it more. It was more important to them because, look, it's the first major trophy in 70 years, isn't it? It's going to mean an awful lot to them. And they've been in that final recently as well and lost it. And so it's another chance to finally get over the line. So, it did seem like that desire was there. It felt like, for their fans going down to Wembley as well, it was a massive occasion, one they wanted to make the most of and make sure that they finally won this time. Whereas for Liverpool fans, I mean, kind of streaming in a little bit late. This is, something they're really used to, going to League Cup finals, winning them. This would have been the third in 4 years had they won it. So, I just think on a subconscious level amongst supporters and players, there's this little bit of kind of, we've done this before. This is, you don't desperately want it as much as you maybe previously did. And that, those fine margins, I thought, like I said, I thought the Newcastle fans were magnificent in the stands and roared on the team. And the team responded by producing a performance that did kind of underline that they were just desperate to win this game. And there was none of the kind of nervousness that you maybe saw the first time they were in the Carabao Cup final. This time, it was, they'd used the experience of that, but still had that underlying desire there that they really, really wanted to get this trophy and end that drought. And I think that did kind of show in the performance that they did just want it that little bit extra.
Yeah, I think it's hard to deny. It was interesting when Eddie Howe talks afterwards. He said even when they played us at Anfield and we beat them 2-0, they didn't want to show their hand and they've been working on some of the set pieces for a couple of weeks. Whereas Arne Slot and Virgil van Dijk both tried to deny that, they wanted it more. But I think we all saw that on the day. And it is kind of understandable in that regard. And I did want to talk about Arne Slot. And I want to sort of pivot into this in the right way because Arne Slot has been absolutely sensational for Liverpool this season. It's a brilliant debut season against a challenging backdrop coming into, no doubts about it at all. But there's been a number of things I think people have felt in the last few games that maybe it's just not, whether it's quite been there or the decision making hasn't been what we'd want it to be. I mean, even going to the lineup, I know I messaged you before. I was massively surprised that Diogo Jota was in. You wonder Gravenberch looked leggy the other night. A few of them did. But bar the Kelleher for Alisson one, which we kind of knew was coming because it's the Carabao Cup and Kwanzaa, because we had to play someone at right back. Was it surprising for you that there was so little changes?
Yeah, but I guess you kind of think from game to game, every game is slightly different, isn't it? And so you hope that even though it's gone with the same team, you can have a totally different game, as I say, different outcome. So the hope would have been going into a game against Newcastle that it would have been more similar to maybe the Anfield game where Liverpool were totally dominant. And if you're in that situation, you are dominating the game, and you're creating chances as Liverpool did in that Anfield game. I guess the question is on the Jota thing, who do you want on the end of the chances? Who's more likely to put the ball in the back of the net, Darwin Núñez or Diogo Jota? Now, in theory, that's how it works. But obviously, the reality at the moment is that Jota isn't getting those chances, is he, at the moment? He's looking a yard short since that injury. He's had a really poor season, to be honest. But the reason I think Slot goes with him, like I say, is because he wants that finishing prowess on the pitch that he knows is there. And also it says something about his lack of trust in Núñez as well. So, wasn't massively shocked that was what he went with. And I still think he could have got a much better performance out of that team because, as I say, Liverpool did dominate Newcastle relatively recently. So they are capable of doing that. But in the end, what Newcastle got and what kind of rendered all selection decisions irrelevant really was that they got the game played on their terms, which was their man-to-man press absolutely killing Liverpool, putting them under pressure, forcing Liverpool to go long into a front line that couldn't really win second or first balls. So had no way of really getting out in that way. And then whenever they did get a little bit of set possession, getting in deep and making that really difficult for Liverpool. So it just was a game kind of played on their terms, really. And I think you're kind of right about Slot. We didn't manage to pull a rabbit out of the hat this time at halftime, which he's done so many times this season.
Yeah.
And you look at the plan, just whatever the plan was, it clearly didn't work because, as I say, Newcastle dominated. But I do think kind of the story of this game for me, outside of Slot's decisions, really is, I think it's the one weakness this Liverpool team has maybe shown is that when teams do go man-to-man against them and turn the game, or even not necessarily even when they go man-to-man, we saw this in the Everton game. If the opposition are able to turn the game into physical duels all over the pitch, then this Liverpool team is lacking. And to be fair to Slot, I don't care how good of a manager you are and how much of a tactical genius you are, that is very hard to overcome because you can't stop that. There's not a lot you can do. I mean, Atalanta did the exact same thing in the Europa League last season. We've seen it whenever teams have gone man for man against this Liverpool team, and they do have these big physical profiles like Newcastle are blessed with. It's something Liverpool can't cope with. And, we don't want to go too deep into how big of a problem this is because look at Liverpool's league position. It's not been too bad. But I think the one area, and this is the big lesson for me coming out this last couple of weeks, is that I think they just need a bit more physicality throughout the team. And that was the major problem. And the reason that Slot, there wasn't much he could come up with to change it because he couldn't make his players bigger.
Nah, it's funny that for all Newcastle talent, and Isak scores again, he's brilliant. They got the likes of Tonale, Bruno, who are good on the ball. There's no doubts about it at all. The two players that probably really stand out for Newcastle in this game is Joe Linton almost ragdoll our midfield at times, just physically battered them, for want of a better phrase at times, just won that all day long. They couldn't live with it. And then Dan Burn probably couldn't believe how often Liverpool were pinging long balls onto his head, almost targeting him somewhat. That was him. And the one thing that I said it in the stadium with the guys that were sat to, I know Arne Slot explained it afterwards, David, but was there a part of you that Alexis McAllister is on Dan Burn? Dan Burn is winning every single corner that goes into the box. Now, I know that you talked about how we won't mark in zones and we move people, and you want Kanate and VVD free. I'd get that. I understand that. But was there not a part of you that thought maybe you might switch Kwanzaa, who's good in the air as well, onto Burn, or just something to stop Dan Burn making unmarked headers in our box?
Yeah, I mean, it's just such an easy fix as well because like you said, the manager did kind of explain it and explained it well in terms of how they worked from those corners. But it was every time Newcastle got a corner and they got a good few in that first half, they were just pinging them flatly, weren't they? Back post.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be a kind of a clever delivery or like put any spin on it or anything like that. It was just, you knew exactly where they were trying to hit and they were hitting it every time. And Dan Burn will win that header there. So as soon as you see that that's the tactic, I just don't see it's madness to me that they can't just do a quick swap there and as you say, just yes, you go man-to-man and zonal, and it's kind of a mix of the two. But if you're going to do that, then just recognise quite early in that game that one of those man-to-man marking, one aspect of that man-to-man marking there is a complete mismatch, and you need to do something about it. And that's a little bit. The players maybe could manage that themselves on the pitch a bit better. But I also don't think Slot even changed it at half time either, which really should have been sorted. So. That is a disappointment because, as much as Newcastle battered Liverpool and completely deserved to win, Slot goes on about set-piece balance, doesn't he, in games quite a lot. And the set-piece balance was 1-0 in Newcastle's favour, and they win the game by a single goal. So, as bad as Liverpool played relative to how good Newcastle played as well, if the set-piece balance had been equal, then that game goes to extra time and maybe Liverpool somehow nick it. So you can't be conceding set pieces, and you've got to be smart about how you defend them. And I don't think Liverpool were in that situation. Maybe that's a little bit of a disappointment from it, really.
Yeah, it was coming, which is always unfortunate. And maybe it is hypercritical, but I have watched it back because even you just think and you look at it, the goal, Dan Burn, I'm not saying it's, it's a great header, it's a great leap. Would you have backed Alisson to have saved that?
Yeah, I was having this debate with a few mates after the match yesterday, actually, when I met up with them about whether that would be the case. I think what we kind of settled on in the end really was that you don't know whether Alisson would have saved it, but he maybe could have. He's good enough to save that one, even though it's in the corner. His movement of his feet, he's just so sharp, isn't he, that he maybe would have got there and got something on it. You do, no matter how good Quivine Kelleher is, you weaken your team, don't you, when you take the best goalkeeper in the world out of it. But equally, I would never go back and do anything different in that regard. I think if you make the promise to your sub goalkeeper that he is going to get that competition, then you have to, as a manager, you have to stick to your word in that regard. And Kelleher's won 2 League Cups at Liverpool himself anyway, so. It's just one of those where maybe he could have saved it, Alisson, had he been in goal, but we will never know. And don't want to put too much on Kelleher because he's been an unbelievable servant. That's his 3rd League Cup final he's played for Liverpool, and he's won it twice. So it maybe, I guess.
Yeah, Red Armchair Supporter, I agree. Sorry, say it's unfair to put it on Kelleher, and also saying setting up at corners in a certain way is fine, but it's not working. That's football. You do have to change it as well, which should probably be one of the disappointments that way. I mean, in terms of looking for some positives, and it is important to sort of single out, I think, a few players. I mean, it was dismal for large periods, but the subs, I thought, especially Curtis Jones played a part as well, but Elliott and Chiesa, they really brought a difference to the team, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, the one he almost scores, which he starts from his own half, just kind of summed up exactly what you have to do to beat a man-to-man press. Is you have to be brave, take the ball in areas where it's really, really dangerous, and turn your way out of it. And then all of a sudden, you've got numerical superiority. So that's the way to go about it. And it's telling that he comes on and does that immediately, and Liverpool start to look better. So he is very good in that regard as well. So I thought he made a telling impact. As you say, I thought Harvey Elliott was bright, and then Chiesa comes on and gets the goal as well. And it does just kind of beg the question, doesn't it? You look at Chiesa putting that one away. Could he have been used more this season? Why have we seen so little of him? Obviously, early in the season, totally get that. He had those fitness issues, and not a lot you can do about that. And they managed him through those. But now he's been on the other side of it. Why? He took that brilliantly, didn't he? He gets shots whenever he's on the pitch for Liverpool. Does he deserve more? And it just seems like it's sort of heading towards him leaving in the summer, really, because I just can't imagine he is very happy with the amount of minutes he's had this season, and that situation is going to drastically change going into next season either. So there's a big kind of question mark over his future, but surely we could have seen more, particularly in this run where goals have been hard to come by as well.
Yeah, it is strange. And the comments are flying in around this. Red Jabby saying, we have a 12-point lead by basically using a 4 midfield rotational season. Slot lacks the trust. And in that respect, it's caught up with us. I mean, that is part of the clamour. It is a bit strange, you're thinking, when they've come in recently, like Chiesa fires yesterday, Elliott gets the assist, looked lively recently, even in the Champions League and different games. But it is fair to say, no matter what we see almost and how tired these players are, there is a clamour, but it really just doesn't seem, especially Chiesa, I think. Like Gakpo again came on and just was injured, I think it's fair to say, unfit, whatever you want to call it. But still, Chiesa can't get on the pitch. It is a bit strange, it seems, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what I find fascinating about this as well is that, I was always thinking of the mindset that kind of, okay, Chiesa just mustn't be doing it in training. He must not look that good. And that's why nothing's changing. And similarly with Elliott and Endo and anybody else who's on that kind of fringes, who's not being trusted through the season. But then his comment in the press conference really stood out to me ahead of this one, where he was talking about kind of, we don't get a lot of time on the training pitch because it's been so many games in midweek, and therefore the players who are on the fringes don't necessarily train with the first team very often, because the ones who play the games then are doing recovery, and then you get a little, 20 minutes together or whatever. So you're not making that direct comparison of kind of like, okay, for the last 5 or 6 training sessions, Chiesa has been out finishing Diaz. He's looked brilliant. He's looked sharp. Yeah. Diaz has maybe not been finishing that brilliantly. Maybe I should make that switch for this weekend. None of that has been going on. And that, the problem is, how does that solve itself for next season? Because you presume Liverpool are going to be as busy again next season. They're going to be doing the same training routine. And, you don't want to change that training routine, by the way, because it's been what's kept all these players fit for the majority of the season. So it just doesn't seem like, if you are Harvey Elliott or Chiesa, you're really given a kind of fair crack at getting in the team. Or that's certainly what I took from what he said there. And it seems to be playing out that way, because we have barely seen these players. And, like I say, when Chiesa has been on the pitch, he's generally got a lot of shots, and then he scores the goal yesterday. Could Liverpool have got a little bit more out of him? That for me is a big question. And like I say, I still think there are now doubts over his Liverpool future as well. And it just feels that that's the way it's going. So it's it's a shame. And I think it's one of the big things really that kind of needs to be addressed, doesn't it, going into next season? Is that you maybe need to see more use of the squad, and maybe it will just emerge, and it will turn out that basically, the reason he hasn't been using them is because he just doesn't trust them at all, or doesn't rate them highly enough, these players who are on the fringes. But and if he does get his right men in, then we will see more rotation. But it's a big question mark, I'd say, going into next season. Not necessarily a huge negative or anything to be overly worried about, but it's a question mark. It's something we don't know the answer to at the moment, and I think a really interesting talking point, really.
Yeah, as we know, and Slot's talked about that it was a summer or a season of assessment. So when he gets a chance, and Richard used everyone to sort of purchase their own players, it will be interesting to see, does rotation come into the element? And for the players that do look a little bit tired, I mean, my thoughts. I'm never a fan of international football, but the international break, do you think almost just a change of scenery, maybe moving away from everything that's going on at the moment after back-to-back defeats for the first time in Slot's career, isn't a bad thing? Or is it a case of now there's competitive international games, this will add to the stress that way? How are you seeing this one?
Yeah, well, anyone who thinks that this is all down to fatigue will probably not be happy about this international break, because, as you say, the likes of Gravenberch, Van Dijk, Salah, they're all going to be playing games, aren't they? And that's always a bit of an injury risk and a nightmare in terms of that. And obviously you worry about that fatigue being added to. I guess it is at least a chance to, a little bit of a mental reset. Some of these players go away and maybe score for the countries and get some confidence. Someone like Gakpo could probably do with being played back into full fitness and sharpness as well. So it's not all bad news. And you just hope they can come back, and it has been an opportunity to reset, and that they can pick up where they not pick up where they left off, because obviously that's been back-to-back defeats, but kind of start up anew really, and find the form again. And it is helpful that obviously they come back. It's an FA Cup weekend, so they've got a bit of time off. Full preparation then for Everton. No worries about the South American players. They should be involved, hopefully, if they're fit. So that is a boost. And then it's all about kind of just starting to get the results rolling in and move closer to sealing the title.